This is something I was talking about. I had a really long conversation with my friend the other day. It was really interesting. And I said, I think what we're seeing is the leftward lurch is it's got too much momentum.
Yeah.
Effectively, what happened is it's something I described before. We have tribalism, which means that the political factions are divided to a point where it's nonsensical.
Yep.
Now, for the most part, I think whatever side we're on, I'm a pretty liberal individual, like old school liberal, whatever. The left is something entirely tribalistic and nonsensical. So I'm sure you and I disagree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But we get along just fine talking politics, even if we disagree.
Right.
So I don't want to claim that the tribalism is equally bad. I don't think it is. But the left is now, adhering to I kind of lost my train of thought because I started getting into the whole right time. What were you talking about before this?
Conspiracy theories.
So
the ones on the left.
No, I think I lost my train of thought. I had a really good point. It just slipped out of me. There, it's gone. That's it. It's over. Sorry, everybody. It was going to be the most profound epiphany ever. It was going to change the world and save everyone.
Oh,
and then
that was it. And I got to be honest with you, not a good time to lose that epiphany. This is kind of a great moment to have an epiphany.
This, Tim.
Yeah.
But pre-epiphany, I think you made a really good point when you talked about the fact that people on the left can push conspiracy theories and other just really bad ideas with impunity. And I think it's true and it's accurate and it's fair to say that we have a crisis in this country of, call it fake news, call it whatever you want, but of disinformation, of people believing facts that just aren't so, and an inability for our current systems to keep up with those facts that aren't true.
I remember the epiphany.
Ooh, good.
Yeah, it was the leftward lurch. That's what I was talking about. And so what I was saying is, because the left isn't talking about policy so much as whatever you say we disagree with, it's turned into this weird thing where the media and our cultural institutions always side with the left.
Yep.
There was a study a few years ago I covered where they mapped out Twitter, and they found that brand marketing existed overlapping with the resistance, the anti-Trump resistance on Twitter.
Yeah.
Probably because the same people who work in marketing live in the same areas and are friends with the same people who work in journalism. So when they see their friends tweet something like Orange Man Bad, they think, I know, let's put out an ad campaign for our soda company called Orange Man Bad. Or the soda company goes to them and say, what sells? Orange Man Bad.
Right.
That's why you end up with rainbow logos for every single company in I think, February is it? No, not February, April?
That sounds right.
I'm sorry, I don't remember which month. I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but I just don't remember. Maybe it's June, actually, that all the rainbow logos appear, because all the brands agree on the same thing.
Right.
If you come out and say something negative, you'll be banned.
Right.
So that's the leftward lurch. The momentum is too strong. So COVID is a really good example. If you come out and say, there's a really interesting study on COVID, banned.
Yeah.
But if you come out and say, it's the end of the world, COVID is killing everybody, and we have to lock down forever, you're good.
Or how about this? Donald Trump is personally responsible for 80 to 90% of deaths.
So Joe Biden said that.
Yeah.
And the Washington Post actually said he made that up. It's completely wrong, and I respect them for calling him out for it.
Me too. That's good on them. But is that video going to get taken down?
Are
there going to be no? Joe Biden's saying that.
Of course not.
That's not going to get taken down. There's not going to be consequences. There's not going to be any cancel culture or lost YouTube privileges.
Let's put it this way. You have two people standing before the world. One guy on the left, one guy on the right. The guy on the left yells at the top of his lungs, COVID is going to kill everybody. Everyone shut down your businesses and hide in your homes. And they go, The guy on the right says, everybody calm down. It's not that bad. The mortality rate isn't that bad. And then he gets removed from the scene. Now you only have one guy screeching the end is nigh.
Right.
And so everyone just runs for it and goes and hides. And anytime any one of these people pops up and says, I disagree, gone.
Yep.
So you had, I think it was the best example of this is Breitbart. When they got their video removed from Facebook, Breitbart filmed a press conference of doctors, one of which was considered to be a kooky doctor. Sure, whatever.
Fine.
But you had a press conference in D.C. Breitbart is a news organization. All they did was film it. It was put on by a Congress member. Facebook removed it because of what the doctors said.
Yeah.
So Breitbart didn't say it. Breitbart was just a news organization saying a congressman held a press conference. Shouldn't they just put like a fact check or something? I mean, even that goes.
You would think.
But even that goes farther than I think they should. It's like it's a news organization who filmed some doctors and a congressman, and here's what they said. That's not. Why is Facebook removing a news organization?
Right.
It's because the leftward lurch. You're allowed to say things in favor of leftist orthodoxy, even if everyone disagrees with it. So I'll tell you the craziest thing that I was told. I had a friend tell me that they're, kind of a liberal, but that they are scared of how the left is going in terms of abortion because they think it's wrong.
Interesting. Okay.
And I said, then you need to go tell people that. And they said, oh, God, no. Like, I can't say anything like that. And I said, what if it's true that every one of your friends agrees with you, but the only reason you think this is because none of you will say it? What if you come out and say it? Well, the problem is the other people, like the other people on the left, even if they agree, will be like, I'm not going to be the deviant. Yep. And they're going to point and they're going to, hiss at him.
Exactly. But you know who can always be the deviant? You can always lean left. And I think that's the key of the lurch, is that the only person who's never going to be problematically offensive within that worldview is the person who pushes it a little bit farther.
Right.
You add a little bit more critical to the critical race theory or the critical gender theory or whatever it is. You can always go further to the left without having to worry that you're going to be the bad guy. And so it's this drift, and you get all of these kind of like, you get these people who are dragged along with it, who don't like your friend, who don't like doing it. That's the Cato study we talked about. It's the 60% of people who, like, there are probably lots and lots of people who I know in DC who work for liberal organizations who just aren't quite liberal enough, and they're a little bit worried that like that guy who lost his job for retweeting a link that said that destructive riots aren't politically beneficial, that they hurt your cause, and the guy lost his job. I mean, it's like it's that crazy.
You know what they can do though?
What?
In secret, they can vote.
They can vote.
I don't think it's enough. I think it's good. I don't think it's enough. And I think one of the issues is if you control culture, you've won.
Yeah.
And so maybe not permanently, but for now, what is it saying? Whoever controls the past controls the present. Who controls the present controls the future. Is that
something
1984
like that.
or something?
That sounds like it should be. It sounds Orwellian. It's
right,
gotta be that. Maybe it's Animal Farm.
So here's what happens. People are seeing all this happen around them, and they're getting scared. They go into the voting booth and they vote for Trump. The leftists in media use this as proof. White supremacy. America's a white supremacist country. See, the racist got elected again. That proves it. Young people who don't know better are being indoctrinated into that new world.
Yep.
So they aren't voting. They will grow up and say, this is what the media has told me my whole life. This must be true.
Right.
And then the secret pro-Trumpers who wouldn't speak up and wouldn't teach the next generation are gone. Yeah. And you have a brave new world. An Orwellian.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And part of it, too, is, it's also like, who are the types of people who tend to be teachers? Like the political bent of a lot of very important, informative organizations happen to lean left. Journalists, teachers, all these other individuals. And so because of that, you do have this kind of surround sound of a certain perspective that a bunch of young, impressionable people, and even not young, but generally impressionable people, take as a given, take as a fact, take as a reality that's going on around them, and they don't know any better. And I think it's particularly true if you don't have people who are super into politics.
Yeah. I think the one thing that people are missing is the schools, and it's amazing to me that conservatives are fighting so hard to get their kids back into them, when we're seeing these leaked curriculums showing that it's all like
gone
in a crazy indoctrination. They're telling the kids all of these insane things.
Yeah, I mean,
like
there's
weird dogma.
And there's some, I think Twitter, honestly, is probably what opened my eyes to it. But there's some really good people who make a really good push for, don't send your kids to government schools. You can homeschool. If you can't homeschool, send your kids to private schools. If you can't afford private schools, find a charter that'll take you in. Like, there are a lot of other options, and I think that's what you got to do. I think you've got to start finding models to break it, because it's not going away on its own, right? You look at something like the LA Unified School District. There's no amount of reform or tweaks or change or, God forbid, money that's going to fix that thing, right? Yeah. And so I wonder if you don't just have to let it go on its own, or if nothing else, you got to kind of say, hey, it sucks, it's a shame, but my kids aren't going to have to suffer the consequences of this thing.
School choice.
Yeah.
And, Trump included that as a agenda for a second term.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing. We had Colin, do you know Colin Wright? He's a
I know that I do, actually.
Evolutionary biologist. We had him on, I think, earlier this week, and he talks a lot about gender and stuff. And he mentioned how he used to be opposed to it, because he thought it was going to be used to teach evolution and creationism. But now that he sees what the intersectional, the identitarian left is doing, he's like, school choice, voucher program, get the kids, put them where you want, because this has gone too far. And I'm right there with him. The craziest thing to me is earlier this year, and I really do love talking about guns now, because I'm like a new gun guy.
Okay, got it.
And so earlier this year, I was like, I don't want any guns in my house. Now I have 6.
Amazing.
I shouldn't have said that. I also have other legal means of defense outside of those too. So.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
but I do definitely. We have. I mentioned this. I think Crowder asked me, and I was just like, "Oh, we got a bunch of compound bows, a bunch of recurve bows."
Amazing. Yeah.
We're ever since the riots happened.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I've gone. We had Corey DeAngelis on, and then he explained.
He's great.
He's brilliant. He explained to me voucher program, school choice, and I was like, it's brilliant. I love it. Yeah. Let's do it. Why can't parents choose where their kids go to school?
Yeah.
And then when the riots broke out and I saw what was happening, and I heard the helicopters. I went and bought a bunch of guns.
Yep.
So there has been a big rightward lurch, too, a sort of shock to liberals who were asleep, not paying attention. And I'm someone who did pay attention. But for the most part, I was like, well, I'm not going to buy a gun. What am I? And then riots happened, and I'm like, I'm going to go buy a gun. And I bought a bunch.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to, like, as someone who lives in D.C. and is familiar enough with the D.C. gun laws to know that they're pretty awful, I think you're also going to see a lot of people leaving the cities for those sorts of reasons too, right? And I think you make a really, really good point on the school choice stuff, because I think that people were fed up with their schools already, but now the way that they're handling the coronavirus stuff, I think is going to be what puts a lot of people over the edge, and they say, you know what, this is too important. My children's education is too important for me to screw up, particularly in a hyper-competitive world, that I can't just let them walk down the road to school, even if that's the closest, easiest option, even if their friends are there, whatever, because it's too great a sacrifice. It's
not just that. Have you heard about these pods that are popping up?
I have, yeah.
So parents, their kids aren't in school, so they're teaming up and putting all the kids under, like, they're all pitching in for a tutor, and the tutor teaches all the kids.
Right.
Saves money for everybody.
Yeah.
Instead of having one tutor teach one kid, you have one tutor teach 20 kids. Congratulations, you made a school.
Yep.
So now you've got parents who are saying, if I'm going to be paying this tutor by pitching in with all my friends, why are my taxes going to a school I don't use?
Exactly.
I would like my money back.
Yeah.
And Trump said, we're going to get you your money back.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Why would we, you know?
And you can't blame them, right? I mean, I think, you're right. And the other thing too is it solves for the socialization problem caused by the pandemic, right? It obviously, it helps the parents out tremendously, and they get a better experience having a tutor than having their parents teach them, but it also lets kids be kids and allows them to play with their friends and go out and do all the sorts of things that they can't do right now in the pandemic. And I think they are going to sit back and say, hey, you know what, this wasn't so bad, right? I think if this continues to happen with schools, you're going to have a lot of people who go through half of a school year or a whole school year, and you have these disaffected parents who are like, I don't know, they're maybe like crunchy granola-y, like pretty leftward leaning people who are like, this isn't terrible, and I think actually it's a lot better than this now scary alternative that I haven't seen before.
I think the most important thing is that kids spend too much time socializing with each other. So I'll put it this way. I look at schools, and what do we see? The teachers and the students are typically adversarial. Mm-hmm. The kids, like, school sucks. That's like kids say it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to a place they hate. They're under the command or authority of someone they don't like. They can't even go to the bathroom if they need to unless they get permission.
Right.
That's a horribly authoritarian system. And then they're getting their social cues from other people who have no understanding of social cues outside of... Right. So it's like you take two people who can't speak any languages and put them in a room and they start making up weird gibberish words. They're not going to function properly in the greater society.
Yeah.
So that's why I say kids are socializing too much. What we need is kids to be around their parents. That's why I'm a big fan of homeschooling, but with these pods. So you have regular adults the kids can be around. And I also think it's very important that parents spend a lot of time teaching their own kids.
Yeah.
So I think, if you go back to where, how humanity essentially was developing at a certain point, I'm not going to speak, I'm not an anthropologist, but the dad would be a blacksmith. And the kid would grow up, and his dad would be showing him what he did.
Right.
But more importantly, the dad would be like, yo, go grab a bale of water. I need it for, the whatever. And the kid would go do it. And then the kid's growing up being told, here's what you need. Here's why you need it. Here's what I need. Go get it for me. Eventually, that kid's a teenager, and he's also a blacksmith. He's an apprentice. So he learns his whole life. He's around all the people coming and patronizing the business, and then he learns how to be a functioning human in this world. Today, we've removed that.
Right.
You have kids who grow up, have no idea how taxes work, don't even know they got to pay them.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean I got to file a form? Says who? When? How?
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know how to even get a job. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to make a resume. You go to school, they don't know how to tell you how banks work. None of that.
Yeah, they don't know how to be an employee either. I mean,
they don't know how to be an employer.
Also,
the craziest thing to me is that when I was younger, I was just sitting there thinking one day, and I thought, how do you make money? Like, how do you get money to buy something you want? And I realized all I've got to do is convince that guy holding that green piece of paper to put the green piece of paper in my hand. It's really fundamentally that simple. So what can you do to get it? And it has to be honest. You can't defraud somebody, and you can't take it from him by force. So I've got to find a way to convince them that he should give me that. So you can trade something. I can say, I can give you this object. I made you a paper boat. Give me $1. Yeah. Or you can say, I will, help you with your homework. What can you do to convince them? And that's how you make money. Not by going to a job and asking a machine to print money for you.
Yeah.
They think the only way to make money is to go to, a business, a corporation, and say, I would like access to the money printer.
Right.
And it's a failed worldview, and it's our fault for not teaching our kids better.
Yeah. And I
think
think
it's schools.
It is. And I think bound up within that is also a lack of teaching of morality. And I think this is probably particularly bad as we get into a society where morality is less assumed, right? There's plenty of benefits to that, but I think one of the consequences is that if we don't have a relatively fixed or understood morality, then kids grow up in an absence of morality as people who aren't moral actors themselves, right? They're too young, they can't possibly understand. And so for a really long time, getting back to the anthropological model, that was the role of the family or the community or the culture or the religion or whatever it is, and now we've foisted that onto a public school system that has no idea how to do it, but unfortunately more and more is attempting to do it, and I think that's where the real danger comes in.
I'll tell you what's really amazing. Are you Christian?
Yes, yeah, Catholic.
So I grew up Catholic. And my family left the church when I was real young, and I became a disillusioned young person, like very anti-church and everything. And then I had an epiphany when I met someone, and he just gave me some insight. I had a couple different moments in my life, and then I don't necessarily want to say agnostic. I do believe in God, but I think it's not like a theistic.
Yeah,
it's more of an Einsteinian, or it's hard to explain. I have my own personal belief system, but I was thinking about something really interesting because. My buddy Adam, who I don't know if you met him, he's doing his own show. He has a song he wrote, and we used to jam on Friday nights. And one of his lines is that it's time to confess our sins. He says that in one of his songs, and I thought about this, and I said the idea that a secular urban liberal type would understand the concept of confessing your sins means that he does have some understanding of confession.
Yeah,
and that's Catholic, right?
Yeah, it is.
So if I thought it was interesting because if you go to another country, maybe in East Asia, and they're going to be like, "What's that?"
Yeah,
I don't understand what that is. It doesn't exist in their culture. And so when you talk about a shared morality, what I think a lot of people in this country didn't realize, and I learned this, very much later on. I remember hearing from a lot of liberals talking religion. They'd say something like, if you need religion not to murder and rape people, then that scares me because, and I'm like, but what you don't realize is that your morals come from the same moral foundation.
Right.
And so I really had an amazing moment when I was learning about Blackstone's formulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
know that's rooted in the Bible.
Yes. Yeah.
I believe Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, it is.
If there is but one righteous person.
Right.
And so that evolved over time through into English common law, which we brought to the United States, and now we have the Fifth Amendment, the right to a trial, the right to remain silent, the right, the innocence until proven guilty, is rooted quite literally. What I explain to people is you might not like the Bible and maybe the originalists who who view it as verbatim, but the way I see it is we started somewhere and maybe there's some things in here that were bad, but we kept the good.
Yeah.
And we carried the good with us, slowly refining it and making it better.
Sure.
And now when you come out and say, I don't need a religion to tell me why I'm moral, then I say, but there are countries that don't have the presumption of innocence.
Right.
And so the presumption of innocence, while it is separated from the faith, we've kind of figured out that core element.
Right.
It's a shared morality from the similar values. So the reason I bring that up is even if I think this more relates to the 90s when I was growing up, when you had the Democrats and a lot of secular liberal types who still had similar moral foundations.
Exactly, yeah.
Even though the religion had been removed from it.
Right.
Well, now we're entering a point where the moral foundations are mirror images.
Yep.
Where you have Black Lives Matter and critical race theory saying, overtly racist things. So part of our moral foundations is that we created the Civil Rights Act. You can't discriminate against people based on these things.
Yep.
It's equality under the law. Well, now they want to erase that.
Yeah.
They say, well, we should be able to discriminate to help people. And that's when our moral foundations have become mirror image. So when I'm talking to my friend and I say, I refuse to live in a world without the Civil Rights Act. It was long fought by our great civil rights leader. We won, and you want to repeal it. And their answer is, but we need to help people. I say, I don't care what you think you're doing.
Right.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yep, exactly.
So,
I
resist.
And I'm right there with you. And I think it's right to say that they are in opposition. And I think one of the things that a lot of people, particularly a lot of people I think in BLM kind of forget is the idea of all people, I don't want to say all lives matter, right? That's got political context, but the idea that all of human life intrinsically has worth and value that is even. and equal is a very Christian concept, right?
Yeah.
This is St. Paul's writing. This is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free. These are Christian. These were incredibly unfamiliar at the time, and so you're right. There's so much of this that then gets passed down to culture. It gets passed down to common law. It gets passed down to the sort of values that we share as a people. And you're right. For a really long time, we could fight about what those values were, and for a long time, obviously, there's meaningful problems in how those values existed, right? Particularly before the 1960s, there were enormous problems with the way that we reflected these values. But I do think that probably from, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there was a really valuable shared framework with which we discussed moral issues, and we're very rapidly moving to a point where we are throwing out the idea that even having that confined conversation is valuable.
So here's kind of what I think in that context where I said the morality is shifted, the base of it. I am a liberal individual. I grew up very briefly Catholic. So I grew up, and I long have since forgotten a lot of the stuff they taught us in Catholic school. Sure. Although I still remember some of the songs. It's kind of funny because they
stay with you. They will always stay with you.
They do, even though I was a little kid. But a lot of the moral foundations, I think that's what it is. I think even secular liberals don't realize they were raised in a sort of a Judeo-Christian framework. Whether it's good or bad is not the point. I'm just saying we shared a lot of these same values. I mean, the Ten Commandments or the Blackstone's formulation.
Right.
But now we have a new idea of a new world where we're colonizers, we're evil, where white people, they say, are evil and have all these whiteness traits like hard work and planning for the future. And it's a really weird thing. Yeah. But their moral framework is completely inverted. Right. So here's what I think. How is it that you and I, we're having a conversation. Is it fair to say you're a Catholic conservative?
Yeah.
I'm like I don't know if it's fair to say I'm like secular. I don't know what I am, but I'm not a non-theistic liberal type. Yeah. We agree on so much. Right. And it's because of a rooted moral foundation, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you can quibble on so many of the details. And I think that one of the big important things here is what we're seeing in the streets in places like Portland. Those aren't quibbles. Those aren't splitting hairs about a 25% effective tax rate versus a 27% effective tax rate. Right. It is a bunch of people who fundamentally do not believe in the rules that have governed our entire system since, we became an agricultural civilization.
But it's beyond that. It's like, yes. It's also in the nitty gritty of our current society. They believe they have a right to use violence against you. We typically, for the longest time, most Americans were not in agreement. And I love it when people bring up the Weather Underground. They're like, yeah, but what, if you want to talk about how bad things are, the Weather Underground. And I was like, I could be wrong, but didn't they do shock and awe campaigns in the middle of the night when no one was around because they didn't want to hurt people?
Yeah, and they ended up killing someone, I think, because they were like, they didn't know they were going to be in there. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's right.
It was like their intent, and what they did was wrong. No joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they were avoiding hurting people. The people today in these riots, they're actively hurting people. In fact, they've killed people. There's 15 dead from the riots, and with a Chaz chop, they literally killed people. Yeah. The security guards unloaded, according to witnesses, for like a minute, just round after round into a vehicle with some teenagers in it, because they thought the teenagers were like white supremacists, but they weren't. They were just kids. So they're literally like, light them up.
And so much of it too, and I think my biggest problem, biggest qualm with all of this is they're reframing and rephrasing the way violence works and is defined.
Oh, totally.
And so if you can say words are violence, and you really fundamentally believe words are violence and using the wrong pronoun is a threat against someone, the way that lots of blue check Twitter activists will tell you these things are literal violence, then it doesn't surprise me when those same people look at Rand Paul getting assaulted and say, how is that worse than messing up someone's pronouns? How is that worse than like the drinking from the Kool-Aid of white supremacy or whatever Lady Gaga said the other day?
Words are violence. Silence is violence.
Silence too, right.
And silence is consent. Okay, so they've covered all the bases, right? Yeah. If you say nothing, you're being violent and consenting to whatever's happening around you. Right. And so that applies in all contexts. If you're not speaking up against the riots, then you are effectively condoning them. Yeah. And you're also being violent against them for not supporting them. And if you say anything, you're being violent against them. Therefore, no matter what you do, we must beat you and crush you.
There's no winning that one. And really, to me, what it comes down to is it's intellectual extortion. right?
Yeah.
You are looking at people and you are saying you can either agree with me or you can face violence. Like it's like The Sopranos if The Sopranos took over like a Twitter and academia. That's what we're seeing happen in real time. And it's amazing because there's so many people who are kind of they've got the gun in their back or the sword in their back. They're walking the plank and they're like, it's fine. Can you guys, did you see what Trump tweeted about today? Like it's such a big concern. And they don't see what's going on around them and the truly radical shifts that we're seeing in the way that the discourse just takes place.
I wonder, elaborating on this moral, shared moral framework idea, I wonder if the reason why we kind of have default liberals, people who just kind of vote Democrat and don't really pay attention, is because they don't really have any kind of moral framework. So they just default to the left and they say, sure, whatever. Then you have the far leftists who have a radically different moral framework where their power is paramount, right, and the health of the tribe and the survival of the tribe is more important than individual rights. Then you have the traditional American faction, which includes liberals and conservatives. Yeah. And that is a shared moral framework on specific, I guess it's fair to say Judeo-Christian values, kind of. We were founded as a Christian nation. But it's become something a bit broader than that, but there is a rooted shared moral framework. So I wonder if the reason why, basically what I'm saying is, there are people who are just not paying attention,
right,
who will go out and vote for Joe Biden without knowing anything about what's going on. And it could be because their moral framework is absent. They're just I want to feed my family. I don't care about anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think part of it too is there's a lot of people who, in the absence of having a particularly firm moral framework, it's really easy to adopt. My Catholic is really showing here, but it can be really easy to adopt a worldly moral framework, right? And so if your moral framework is basically, I don't know, Twitter and Facebook and whatever video you find on YouTube and the movies that you watch and the video games you play, then that can be super, super problematic in a lot of different reasons. And so I think it can be easy to adopt that instead, and that is destined to fail. But that's almost that passive sort of framework that ends up resulting.
I've had a video on my main channel about Jordan Peterson for a long time. I've never it's like my default video from years ago, and I basically talk about how we're experiencing a crisis of purpose, where you have a lot of far leftists who they don't know what their purpose is. So they've created one.
Yes.
It's challenging the empire and white supremacy.
Right.
But then you have a lot of other people who have no purpose, so they just sit around playing video games all day. Then they find someone like Jordan Peterson who tells them, here's how you develop purpose.
Yeah.
Find the heaviest thing you can and then carry it. And that is, a part of the culture war. People who have nothing to do and don't understand, but are longing to do something.
Because I think we all are, right? Like I think at the end of the day, and I think Peterson really struck a chord, I think, with a lot of people for exactly that reason. He understands that people fundamentally, and in a lot of cases, particularly young men, are striving for some level of meaning in a world that has very, very little meaning. And outside of the more traditional, like, I need to go be a blacksmith because I need to keep growing the family blacksmith building, or outside the confines of traditional faith, it can be really, really hard to find something. And so if you've got this quasi-religion and leftism, it's a really, really easy thing to glam onto.
We've kind of won. We have abundance of food. We're all overweight. So what do people do? And so they got to figure something out. Otherwise, what's the meaning of life? Why are they alive? And then they just, I don't know. They sit in their bedrooms bored and scared. But they found a new meaning in this new dogma.
Right, because at the end of the day, what critical race theory I think gives a lot of people a really great excuse to do is it gives them easy bad guys. There are monsters. They can go out and slay the monsters that are very obviously in front of them, and I don't know, maybe behind them in line at the supermarket too. It's everywhere. It's omnipresent. This awful, terrible thing that is toxic whiteness or toxic masculinity or toxic whatever you want to get mad about. If it's everywhere, then every day of your life can have meaning. It's like you're on a giant open-ended RPG video game where you're on adventure. You're going on an adventure, and there's always going to be some monster that crawls out of the forest that you get to be the righteous one to destroy. And the problem is, the people that they always happen to find and the issues they keep finding aren't monsters.
Right.
And there's no one to tell them they're not monsters.
Right. There's no great enemy. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.